Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode number 149 of the Comic Watchers Show. I am your numerically challenged host, Matt Meyer. Mighty Mike Akins is traveling for Thanksgiving with family today. So we have Professor Cody White in his spot. Hello, Cody. Hello, Hawaii.
Aloha.
Aloha indeed. This week we are so honored to have Stephanie Phillips and the one and only Peter Krause joining us to talk about their brand new ComiXology comic, We Only Kill Each Other. It just dropped today, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, guys?
Was it
Tuesday.
Was it last week?
Tuesday?
Tuesday.
I don't know what day it is.
It's brand
new. It was the 16th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
it's helpful to know what day of the week it is.
Shame on me, but listen, it's one of those times of the year where I think dates are meaningless. So, because we all have so much going on.
Yeah.
But thank you all so much for dropping by on a Thanksgiving Eve to hang out with us. It's truly an honor. And this comic it has a lot happening. I don't think we could do it justice to try to describe it ourselves so Stephanie, Peter, if you guys want to, for those who don't know about this, please jump on in, tell folks what they're missing out on if they haven't read it.
Go ahead, Steph.
Okay. Yeah, this is like an alternate history take on Jewish American gangsters that took on the American Nazi movement as World War II is kind of looming in the background. So it's set in 1938, partially based on a true story where American Jewish gangsters were actually asked to kind of disrupt these events. There was something called the German American Bund, which is kind of funny. I just moved out of Buffalo, but for a while I was living in Buffalo, and the German American Bund was actually founded in Buffalo, which was fascinating to learn while I was living there. But it was essentially like an American Nazi movement. They had the American Führer, who we see in the story, and our two gangsters, one who is like a rising kind of thug. He's young, he wants to be more important than he is, and then a very old school immigrant from Poland who is less about like beating people up and more kind of pulling the strings from the background. And of course they're clashing, while at the same time this kind of obviously these large global events are looming on the horizon, and it will eventually bring them together-ish, kind of.
Maybe.
Stephanie, there is a lot to unpack with this story, but let's get into the genesis of it, because you've done historical fiction before with Butcher of Paris, and that was amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
And this is getting into whole new territory. We've got World War II stuff, we've got Jewish gangsters and Judaism in and of itself, and American Nazis, and a lot of things to unpack. We could probably write papers on this thing after it's all said and done. But what's the origin story here for We Only Kill Each Other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of born from Butcher of Paris, like studying Jewish history, which factored into Butcher of Paris as well. Being Jewish, that's something that I've always been interested in. I think that's kind of my way of relating to Judaism, because while I was raised initially Jewish, we kind of just abandoned it at some point, and then I think I came back to it as an adult from just a very analytical standpoint of learning the history and my family history as well, as it relates to that. And I kind of read about Jewish American gangsters and my grandfather, who is from New York, and kind of our personal history with that, and I just became really fascinated by it. But one thing I wanted to do different after A Butcher of Paris was like, I love research. Obviously, a lot went into that, but at the same time, I didn't want to just tell the event as it was. I wanted to create my own characters. And the other difference was Butcher of Paris. I had so many transcripts that I didn't really feel like I was putting words in somebody's mouth, because I had their actual words, and I don't like taking historical figures and being like, maybe he liked mint chocolate chip ice cream, and his family is like, what? He would have died if you gave him mint chocolate chip. Like, that would be horrible. I'd feel so bad. So I really wanted to come at it from a different perspective. Like, I didn't have those kinds of documents, so I wanted it to be, something that I didn't have that concern, and could also focus on things that I really care about. Like, Jonas is really struggling with the religious aspect of his own life. And I think I kind of see that as the personal element for me that ties into the story of like, trying to understand what that means. And after my own grandfather passed, it became a little bit more important to study that, like, even more. So, yeah, so that's kind of where that came from.
That's so fascinating, and I did not realize. I mean, I don't know how public a knowledge it is or isn't that you yourself are Jewish, but I love that you're able to bring your own family history into that. And I want to come back around to that at some point in the interview. But Peter, how did you start getting involved with this project?
Well, I mean, I think, and Steph can probably talk more about this, but I was working on something with Ron Mars, and wasn't that how you saw some of the stuff that it's a Russian gangster type story that we've got about halfway through, and we'll see if we ever finish it. Ron's pretty busy these days, but I think Steph had seen the initial drawings for that. The first half of it actually is completely done, and she got in contact with me, and I was really fascinated with the story. I mean, I really enjoy that period. In fact, the funny thing was that I had drawn Archie 1941 not that long ago, the miniseries where we put the Riverdale gang back in the early 40s during that time of World War II, and I kind of gotten rid of a lot of my reference. So I had to, once we started working on this, I go, why did I do that? So I had to accumulate that era reference again to start working on it. But it was a great script. Let's just put it that way. Steph really right. These characters just kind of jump off the page. They're alive. And Steph, not all writers write with a real idea of visuals, and Steph definitely does. She's got very strong ideas about how to frame things and that sort of stuff. She will defer to her artist, and that's great. But it's a big plus having someone who's thinking like that, supplying me with reference, giving me lots of reference for the Jewish rituals and that sort of thing. So as a good Methodist boy,
not totally out in the cold.
I read Chaim Potok novels when I was in high school and junior high. So that was kind of my exposure to that culture.
Very cool. Very cool. Cody, do you want to jump on in?
Yeah, it's funny. Peter just stole my question right out from underneath me. I was going to ask about if doing Archie 1941, which was fantastic, by the way,
thanks,
had any impact on coming back and doing this now, as far as reference and research and all of that.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, you know what? That era is fun to draw. I think if you're doing, from at least my personal standpoint, if you're going to do a historical type comics, maybe only the 70s is more fun to draw. I mean, the fashions and everything, and I'm old enough to have grown up during the 70s. But that era, the 30s, the 40s, the cars, the architecture, the way people dress, it's, kind of a gritty time in our history. That is a lot of fun.
Right on. Okay, so let's take it in a different direction then. This is for ComiXology, and shout out to ComiXology and Pamela from Superfan PR for setting this up. She's the best. She takes real good care of us. We love her. Is there any difference for you guys working on a digital comic versus an old style, floppy comic series? Does that change your creative process at all?
Go ahead, Steph.
I don't think it changed the creative process too much. It changed more of like the back end, like preparing things. It will see print, so I guess like one of the things I mean, it's just like a practical thing, like having to prepare one version that would go to Dark Horse for print. Working with Dark Horse to kind of prepare that, but then also preparing digital files and taking into account like digital readership. So like one difference will be like in the trade paperback, there's a double page spread, whereas in the digital version, there is no double page spread and it's kind of arranged a little differently. Yeah, so there's like a couple differences that are just really, really practical, but in terms of actually just writing it, not writing things like spreads, which, in like issue 1, initially, Peter and I had started working on it, not knowing 100% that it was going to go to ComiXology, so there was already a spread drawn and things like that. So I would say then the one consideration scripting was like not using large spreads or splashes, things that in the digital reader, because I think it jumps from panels, just being a little more conscientious of that after, moving forward once we were on board with ComiXology.
Yeah, and I don't think it was, other than, what Steph talked about with the, spreads or whatever. And personally, I feel a lot more comfortable working, in a standard grid format anyway. I don't do a whole lot of crazy stuff with my panels. So other than that, I mean, I'd worked with, Mark Wade on the Thrill Bent stuff, and that's when we were working in a completely different format, which was almost like half of a comics page. And that was tougher. This wasn't much of an adjustment.
Interesting. So, Peter, you were saying that in Steph's scripts, she often uses basically an artist's perspective for how she's envisioning the page. How do you guys collaborate on that? I mean, I imagine there's really not friction or anything like, no, I demand this be drawn this way.
There was all kinds of fighting.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of curious, when we've spoken with writers in the past, they don't have as much of an eye like that. And I've read horror stories in the past of writers and artists clashing when it does happen like that. And I'm just curious to hear how you guys kind of work through that process together.
Yeah, I mean, there might have been a few times, and I can think maybe one or two offhand where Steph suggested something, and I think one of them, looking back on, I should have taken her suggestion, quite frankly, that I might have done something different. But she will think about things like, camera angles and low angle shots or up above shots, and that is not, I won't say it's completely unusual, but it's not usual. But I think that we talked stuff out. And I think for the most part, for the visuals, she deferred to me as far as that goes. But if I had any questions or anything, that wasn't an issue at all. At least on my end. Steph might have a different take.
Right.
No, that's exactly how I feel. I mean, I try to mix it up like every once in a while. If I've got like an idea in my head, like, oh, maybe this would be cool, I might throw it out there. But usually I'll say something in the script like, if you totally hate this idea, that's fine. But I also, try to leave a lot of leeway too in places where, like, God, I absolutely trust Peter. Like, having my name next to his on a book is pretty amazing. So like if
okay, it's pretty amazing having my name next to yours on a book.
Yes, it is. I mean, I didn't just see that thing that you drew for Ron. Like, obviously, I've known your work for a while, so right. I was thrilled that Peter would come on board, and of course, I knew he would make this amazing. I do think pretty visually, I just like weird stuff. Like I went to school on art scholarships and eventually abandoned it. But like I had enough classes and was horrible at enough things to know that I can respect, like I cannot draw. The classes were terrible. Like I was so bad at it. I was there for photography and, you still have to take all these other things. And yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I came away from that with was like, God, respect all artists, like across the board, because I cannot. But the cool thing was getting to listen to people talk about how they visualize things in different mediums, and like that's something that really stuck with me, was like getting to listen to experts talk about this, and it's almost something I wish I could go back to and just like absorb even more of it and stop with the anxiety of like, well, I can never do that. It's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, who cares if I can't sculpt? I should have just listened and like sat there, and that would have been pretty cool. But
Yeah.
yeah,
no, that's interesting. I didn't know that you had any kind of an art background at all, Steph, but it, it comes through in the scripts. And I've got to admit that, besides being an art major, I was a journalism major in college. And actually, my first freelance job out of school was a writing assignment. So I have,
that's awesome.
Awe of people that do the writing. I know it's hard. Writing is hard.
So, Steph, when it comes to you writing your scripts, how much detail do you wind up putting in there? Like, there's at one end, there's pretty, the Marvel method, for lack of a better term, and then at the other end, there's the Alan Moore standard, where every panel gets about 3.5 pages of discourse and history. Where do you fall in there, especially since we're dealing with an historical comic here that is going to need a lot of reference?
I mean, I would say all of my scripts are pretty all over the place and really tailored to the artist. Like, my script for Riley on Harley looks absolutely nothing like the script for Mike, who's drawing Wonder Woman. And from that, it doesn't look like what I gave Pete. Like, I really try to tailor to what each artist wants and is most comfortable with. Riley really does want something that looks more like the Marvel method, and it's way looser. We've also done 20-something scripts together, and it has kind of changed over time.
Sure.
With some of the historical stuff, like, I try, my big thing with historical is, and I've heard other artists or writers talk about doing historical and being like, the buttons have to be exact or something like that. And that's not me. Like, I'm into that. I want to read about it, and I think it's super cool. Like, I own buttons from the Civil War. Like, I've got all kinds of weird collections of stuff. I'm very into that. But when it comes to the comic, I'm really more interested in, do we know what time period it is? Like, if somebody looks at it and is like, this kind of brass wasn't used until, like, oh, okay, man. Like, like I don't think it really takes you out of the time period. And my shorthand for it is like, do you recognize that person is a Nazi? Like, are you still invested in the story? And that's what's important to me. Some of the details, like Peter was talking about, some of the kind of Jewish references that I gave him. And, some of that for me too was like going to my mom and being like, Mom, I do not remember how to say this in Hebrew. So like, that was kind of fun too, getting to, talk with my mom and like my grandma and make sure that I was actually doing it correctly, because it has been a while for me. So, trying to give as much of that to Peter without being super overwhelming and annoying, and also picking and choosing. Like, if I'm going to be like, this synagogue is going to be very detailed, like, trying to mix that up and be like, whatever you think looks best for the bar or something like that, and giving Peter complete design freedom on something else, knowing that the synagogue was maybe a little reference heavy.
I got you.
So one of the striking things about Butcher of Paris was the way that you kind of took the post-war apathy and painted that onto the modern landscape with, the post-political apathy that we're dealing with in the country right now. I wonder, with We Only Kill Each Other, are we going to see a similar kind of way of dragging the politics into the modern day? Or, I mean, one of the things that struck me was that nobody's a hero here. Everyone's a villain. Yeah. And maybe that's where we are as a country right now. Maybe we're all villains. But yeah, I just wanted to know, like, where do we think this is going?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see links to a lot of the civil unrest, having growing factions of people that are really, that maybe see themselves as the heroes of the story or the saviors, which is what I think I call our American Führer, see themselves in that way, but obviously buying into a really damaging, dangerous, evil ideology. And on the same token, it's like, maybe not everybody else in the story is really heroic either, but I think there are degrees of evil, and Nazis are obviously way up there. But yes, are they a stand-in? Like, yes, do we still see, Nazi movements in the street? Like, some of the stuff I read even last year, like really horrific anti-Semitic things that were written in protests or like marched outside people's offices, politicians' offices that happen to be Jewish. Like it's. I can't remember the exact sign, but I think it was what used to hang outside of Auschwitz. Somebody was hanging that outside of a Jewish politician's house just last year. And it's like, this is not even just Judaism, obviously, that extends much further. And I definitely think that that's related.
Yeah, there seems to be, and I know this isn't just specific or special to American, but there definitely seems to be something woven into this country's DNA that is very xenophobic. And I mean, again, it's of course not just specific to America, but you definitely, like Cody was saying, you definitely find these links from the past, and you can connect it to things that are going on now. I mean, it's all through the major discourse in recent years, of course, with Confederate statues and things of that nature, and so many other things as well. But you get to the fact that, yes, there was an American Nazi movement, and yes, a lot of prominent Americans were supporters of it, that and people get a little uncomfortable. What, if anything, stood out to you in your research for an American Bund, and that really jumped out at you, or maybe made your skin crawl a little, other than the topic in and of itself?
I mean, I think like the fervor around it, like how much it grew. There's also, this is not shocking, but at a lot of the rallies, you would have, counter protesters, people protesting the rallies. And, you can just imagine who the police went after in that scenario. It was oddly protective of the right for these Nazis to have these protests. And, it's just like one of those things that's so reflective of our time period. And it was like, you look at this and it's, people seem very surprised by the last couple of years that we've had politically and what's been going on. And it's like, you're surprised, but exhibits A through like 5 million, like here's our history that like, same with Butcher of Paris. Like, I think there are little elements to large events that make those events maybe more human, whether we want to acknowledge that human nature can often be kind of evil and nasty. The serial killer, like this little moment in World War II with how many, and my phone thinks I just said Siri instead of serial killer. Great. I don't know who it's trying to call. That's concerning. But I think it makes, like, instead of doing an entire book of World War II, here's one moment that I want to hone in on and how people reacted to it. Sure. And I kind of like that here, which is like, not just like the war is impending, it's coming, it's this huge event that people are talking about, and there's a lot to deal with there in terms of American history and the approach of World War II. But this is one moment that I really wanted to look at in terms of I'm interested in reactions. So like, this is how people were reacting to it. And, across the board, it's political, it's troubling. It's, you have politicians saying, well, we can't get involved, but like the gangsters can, let's go have them like bust up the place with a baseball bat and maybe that'll fix everything.
Right.
Interesting problem solving. So,
I mean, it's an approach.
Right.
Yeah. I can't say, I mean, I'm terribly surprised that the feds turned to the supposed lesser of two evils, but at the same time, I mean, there we are. So are you in a word, are you capturing the zeitgeist by reflecting it against the past?
I mean, I think so. Like, that's what I do when I write or when I'm reading about this. So I'm guessing that probably comes through. I've said this before because I just find it interesting. Like, Brian Stelfreeze read some of my work and he read this and he just told me that like what a lot of these have in common is just like, I seem to be very disillusioned with the American ideal, which I was like, oh yeah, you're a very smart individual. That makes sense. I didn't even know that I was like doing this, but yeah, that's something that I think comes out a lot in what I'm working on or reading about.
Peter, how have you, I should say, or are you connecting with some of the political and social aspects of the story? I mean, Stephanie's writing it, but you're getting
Sure.
to render it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm older, and my folks are still alive. They were born in the 30s. They grew up during World War II, so they were young, but so they're a good resource on this. And even growing up, my folks played the music from that era. It doesn't seem that long ago, and I was a young man when Watergate happened. I see what went on with the former guy who's no longer in office, and these things recur. The fight always has to go on. It is not over. That didn't World War II. We would think that would have put an end to the Nazi thing. The other thing about this story is, when we're talking about Nazis during the late 30s, I mean, we have the luxury of looking back on this. We know how bad it became. When that movement was starting, you had sympathizers like Charles Lindbergh, a hero in this country. So it's troubling, but I think we have to continue, to be on our guard.
Absolutely. Cody, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So I guess not to be overly political here, but I mean, I guess it's not Thanksgiving yet. We can still talk about politics, right?
That's the best time to talk about politics.
Right.
Given the past week where Kyle Rittenhouse was set free, but the 3 murderers of Aubrey were convicted. Yeah. Sorry, I got choked up. Oop.
Yeah.
Guess I'm not ready to talk about that yet. This comic seems like it kind of strikes a really potent chord in a week where we've had so much turmoil and small victories that are hard fought. So I was kind of, I don't know. I guess there's not a question there. I guess I just wanted to say kudos. Like, it was a brilliant comic. I fucking loved it.
Oh, thank you.
Like, it struck a chord with me very much so. Yeah, Matt, step in for me.
I got you, brother.
Oh,
I got you.
I'm touched it. But yeah, it's been a rough, 10 days or whatever here.
Yeah. It has. And it's meaningful and important that while the fight for social justice continues, we have works like this that are able to strike chords with readers and remind them that, hey, this isn't something new. This is a fight that has to endure. So let's talk about Jewish gangsters now. To flip I know we're running a little short on time. It's something I really wanted to get into because I'm kind of a mob nerd, so to speak. And I mean, it's just one of those genres like look, I'll watch Sopranos all day. Just put it on, we're good.
That's what I did yesterday, so yeah.
I'm happy for you. Whoa, that's a whole nother conversation about that show. But a lot of people don't realize that the Jewish mobs in the first, I don't know, at least 3 to 4 or 5 decades of the 20th century were every bit as powerful and ruthless as the Irish, as the Italians. Are often portrayed as being, at least stereotypically so, and also historically as well. But the Jewish gangsters get lost in the mix a little bit. And I really think it's fascinating that, at least in your portrayal here, there is that mix of, yes, there's the same old bloodthirst that you see from us, any other mob guys, but you've also got some Jewish ritual going on. Like, don't make me work on the Sabbath, talk about that a little bit, Steph, if you could.
I just think that juxtaposition is really interesting. Like, having and you mentioned The Sopranos, and I think one of the things that Sopranos did that was so fascinating is like, here is the family life, here is the therapy session of this like mafia guy.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing are these more humanizing moments about them. And you have this guy that's very invested in his history, his heritage, his tradition. And this is how he makes his living. Like, this is, he immigrated and he became really invested in this kind of lifestyle. And I'm interested to see, obviously moving forward, how that clashes with somebody that has kind of denounced that aspect of their life. And that was something that I was really intentionally kind of looking forward to, was kind of like a new meets old kind of thing as well, which, leaving just the Jewish aspect of it, something that was going on quite a bit with kind of mob activity at the time, was very much a clash of the new meets old. So it's both the time period as that's going on. It's related to gang activity. Like, there were hits going on of just people like, okay, I've decided now I want to be in charge. I'm just going to go in this restaurant and off the guy. And now you're in charge. So we've kind of got this like almost like a stalemate going on between these two really heavy hitter gangsters that are also very different. One thinking, how can you be the leader of this gang if you're not willing to be in the street and literally getting your hands dirty? And the other guy saying, like, you are just swinging your fists. You're not thinking, you're not building something. You're just destroying things in your wake. And yeah, so it's very much, new meets old, but also this kind of clash of someone that's very invested in this heritage, whilst someone younger has kind of started to lose that along the way.
Well, and with Jonah's, you have the added aspect of the tarnished hero of World War One, and I don't know if you're planning to get into it. Of course, no spoilers, but I'm definitely getting a sense of some PTSD and lingering trauma from his time in the trenches. Can you talk about that at all, or we kind of put that in the safe?
Yeah. So, I mean, his father fought in World War One for Jonas. And I mean,
I misread that.
So the hero he's talking about at the beginning of it is kind of like talking about just how different sides see heroes.
Right.
And then, but you're right, like someone like Solomon, whose family had issues during World War One and is now in America because of this fallout. Like it absolutely looms over, and we will kind of hear and see more about that, especially as we get into learning a little bit more about Jonas's father, kind of as we move forward too.
Right on.
Can
Cody?
I fanboy a little bit? So, Peter, I grew up, like, one of my favorite titles back in the day was Power of Shazam.
Yes.
And that is, like, your art is all over that. You also got to draw a mulleted Superman, which is pretty awesome. Not a lot of people got to do that.
Wow, man, you do remember all that stuff. So
we know things around here.
So, like, but most of your background is in superhero comics. And then here you have, with the exception of the Archie one, like a lot of the stuff with Mark Waid as well, superhero books. What is the difference between doing the art for a superhero book versus something like this where, like, I don't know if it brings more challenges or perhaps maybe even less challenges because there's a little bit less crazy stuff happening. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this stuff, like with what Steph wrote, or the Kickstarter I did with Chip Mosher, the Blacking Out, which is set in the 70s. So I love to draw that. This stuff is in my wheelhouse, quite frankly. I love to do these, kind of more street level type of works. I mean, shoot, even if you go through, some of the DC stuff like Gotham Central, I mean, that was a great book. I love that book. And I'm a huge Brubaker and Phillips fan. I mean, I was just over at Thought Bubble and in the UK, and I got to meet Sean Phillips, and that was like, wow, that's great. I mean, just awesome. So this kind of stuff, I think, is something I feel very comfortable doing. I like, you know, that kind of dark shadows. Maybe we get a little messy with the artwork. You know, it's a little grittier. Those kind of things are a lot of fun. I just feel very comfortable doing that kind of work.
Very cool. Yeah, I've always wonder about that. Like, you see people kind of cross over into stories that aren't typically in their realm.
Sure,
But like,
sure.
even
Well, yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, the thing was that when I was trying to break in to comics, they were always trying, you know, you got to pump up the superhero stuff a little bit more, pump that up, because, you know, you can draw people and that sort of stuff. So in some sense, that was more of a challenge for me.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Like, and you know, we see it with Steph's work with Riley right now. Like, Riley Rossmo isn't typically doing a lot of superhero work, but now he's on Harley Quinn, and you know, he just did that Martian Manhunter series, and they're so different from what he had been doing that they look so fantastical in that kind of mode. So I mean, like, I like to see the code switching. I think that's really neat.
We can do it. We can mix it up.
Would help if I was unmuted. Haven't done that in a while. What brought you guys to ComiXology with this project? I imagine you probably could have taken it anywhere, the Dark Horse, Image, you know, maybe Aftershock, but it's on ComiXology. Speak to that a little bit.
You want to, Steph? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think ComiXology is doing some really interesting things. You know, we knew, I think a little bit earlier than other people did that they were, you know, really going after people like, obviously you can see the Scott Snyder line of books, like they're really pulling in some really awesome, talented people, and all these ComiXology books, which I've been reading even up to this point, like they're awesome. Like I like that they're really trying to build this out. You know, Peter talked about his relationship with working with Chip Mosier. So we had somebody that we really liked and trusted, and, you know, working with Chip, having him talk to us about like their plans for the ComiXology Originals line, you know, the deal with Dark Horse to kind of print through them, which was something that was important to, I like seeing it in print, and I think that it's also an important thing for the comic shops and retailers. So yeah, I think it was just kind of like a really good blend of letting us do our thing. You know, they are very much like, come to us when you have the finished product. So we get to kind of go really make this thing together, and then come out of that and hand over this thing, I guess, digitally. So not actually handing something to them, but kind of give them that package. And that's, yeah, it's kind of nice. It's nice to have a lot more control over all of those elements. Like even little things like chapter breaks and things like that are very much like us doing that.
Right.
Like, you know, obviously Philip Smith, who helped us with that, who's a really good designer, you know, he helped with that. But it's nice. It's, you know, I've worked with Philip a lot, so it's something where like Philip and I would go get on the phone for long periods of time and like go through what we want to do with it, and then he would go do wizard magic and come back and it looked amazing. So that was cool to kind of have a lot of our own personal, like, real thumbprints on the
Right.
final product.
Yeah, and you need someone, and Steph did such a great job. If you're going to do the ComiXology thing, you need a good point person that can line all that stuff up, because you're not relying on an editorial staff per se, like if we had taken it to some other place. So like Steph auditioned several colorists. We got Ellie Wright, who did a great job on the coloring. I'm so happy that we have her on the team. Yeah, Steph was a great point person on this, making sure that, you know, everything was in place. And yeah, we were fortunate. I have, you know, I freelanced at Boom when Chip Mosher was there, and Chip is you know, one of my best buddies in the comic biz. But even so, he has a board that he has to run anything by, as far as, are we going to do this for ComiXology or not? So, you know, it might have given us an end, but we still had to impress the people that, you know, made the decision.
Speaking of wizards and beautiful things, the covers are being done by Dave Johnson.
Oh, yes.
Butcher of Paris trade
Yes.
right here. I had to buy it for my wife because she wants to read it. Talk to me about working with such an iconic, I mean, to me, the best cover artist of all time.
Well, before Steph says anything, Steph said, well, Pete, if you want to draw the covers, you can, but I think I can get Dave Johnson. I go, I think we should get Dave.
Yeah, I mean, Dave is kind of my, I mean, he's one of my best friends. It's wonderful that one of my best friends is this like Eisner Award-winning comic book cover artist. So that's nice. Yeah, I had asked him, I had actually been working on the Butcher of Paris, and Dave is the person that told me like stop doing research and actually just like make it, because I had been working on it for so long, and I was like, oh, okay. And it was like, you know, at dinner, and Dave was just like, well, here's how I imagine the cover would look. And I was like, well, if you already know the cover, like, why are you just do the covers for it? And I oddly, like, you know, when I had pitched this to Dark Horse, the funny thing was I think they accepted the project because they loved Dave's covers so much. Like they were like, yeah, you're fine, but these covers, and I was like, I totally get it. Like they're great. And he did such a good job and like really nailed it that you know, I was excited that our team liked the idea of approaching him about that as well. So you know, we've seen all 5 covers. I think we've revealed 2 so far, but they are all phenomenal.
They are just crazy good.
That second one that he just showed the other day on his Facebook page, oh my god. Like,
Yeah.
I might have to get a
I want that as a poster in my room. It is so cool.
Right?
Yes.
I don't know. That cover to number 1 is kind of top notch already. Are you sure about that, Cody?
Yeah, cruise over to Dave's page and take a look at number 2.
All right.
With
But
that
I mean,
number
it's
two,
got
it's pretty darn
1930s
good.
gangsters with Tommy guns burning a picture of Hitler. That only Dave can make it so. But you know, this is just, and we're starting to run out of time, so I don't want to prattle on too long as I'm wont to do. But this really is such a special series, and I mean, I'm sad that it's only 5 issues. But because I'd love to see more stories in this world, but of course, you know, we live in a world of more and more finite comics, and I think that's a good thing because it lets you tell a good, concise story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when this is over, though, are you guys gonna work together some more?
That's
I would love
totally up
to.
to Steph.
All right.
Me.
You know, I would. You know, I'll drop anything to go work with you again. You know that.
Really? Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I absolutely hope so. I mean, of course, I think we were asked, or at least I was asked, I think by Chip initially pitching this, like, is there more story, or what does it look like beyond this? I absolutely know what that would look like. Like you said, you know, if it's finite, I do have to say, like, I don't like writing endings. Like, I feel very, I don't know if people have read my endings before, there's usually something where it's like, that's a cliffhanger. Like, I'm an asshole. Oh, sorry. I don't know if I can say that on here. With endings, I like leaving something that's like going to draw you in to potentially come back or like throw you in a weird direction. I feel really weird about like conclusions, like, you know, where people are like holding hands and kumbaya. And I have to say that, like, I think We Only Kill Each Other is probably my favorite ending I've ever written. And having seen the last page that Peter has drawn, I'm not like usually somebody to give myself kudos for anything. I feel so good about what the team accomplished on this last page that if we never do more We Only Kill Each Other, I am so proud of this.
Endings are hard, and Steph nailed the ending here.
Okay. All right. I mean, I wouldn't think otherwise. But all right, I'm ready. Cody, you want to jump back in? Oh, maybe if he can get unmuted.
I pushed the wrong button.
Oh.
Yeah. So, that totally threw me. Actually, finding the
Well,
wrong button.
Stephanie was kind enough to give us
a
few more minutes, so might as well use them.
Absolutely. I mean, what a joy it's been to be here with you guys. Like I say, Peter, I grew up on your books, and Steph, you were my 2020 Rising Star writer, and obviously I was right. I was correct. Here you are, a legitimate star in this field. Does that sort, like, I feel like we could kind of talk about it from both ends. Does that sort of like rise to prominence have an impact on how you feel in the field? And what was that like for you, Peter, when you were going through it, a while back?
As far as rising prominence, I've thought like I've had a very nice, it's funny because you think about careers, and I wouldn't say it, but I always thought about if I have a career like a Tom Waits, equating it to music, like a Tom Waits career, where you do, good quality stuff. You're maybe never a chart buster or anything like that, but you had a long, nice career like that. I'd be happy. I think that's kind of the career I've had, is working, that way. So I'm happy to do the work is still fun to do. It's still exciting every day to get up and solve those visual puzzles. And I don't see that, coming to an end anytime soon.
Awesome. I love to hear that.
Steph's a superstar, so.
That's not how we feel on this side of the, the equation. But I don't know whatever happens that hits where you like feel that. I don't know. I will say, like, going back to conventions after a couple of years off and now having written so much more and some higher profile things, people bring me water at conventions now. I don't know if that's an indicator of anything, but that has not happened prior. Like, that's nice. Like,
someone's looking out for you. Someone cares enough to
it's like,
keep you hydrated.
Like my standards are very low. That's I'm not dehydrated. Thank you. That's so nice. I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, like, I am I don't think I'm ever like a person that's going to be like settled. I always want to make things, kind of like Peter said. I don't really see an end to that, whatever I'm making. Like, I don't have a goal of like, I've done this thing, I can pack it up and go home. Making things is like what fulfills every part of my existence, and I just have to keep doing it. I sold my soul to the devil. That's kind of the deal we made. I just have to keep making, and it's going great so far. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate the kind words, though. Thank you very much, and thanks for supporting We Only Kill Each Other.
Yeah,
I keep wanting to say Wokio, which I don't know how many people outside of our outside of our group like know that we call it Wokio, and like
okay, at least that rolls off your tongue. Unlike what's the furthest place from here, where if you try to turn that into an abbreviated word, it's just like
something is killing the children.
Yes. The title, which we can't even put on our articles in its full length, or else it gets busted off of Facebook.
Right.
A whole funny thing. But Steph Phillips, Peter Krause, this is a really special comic. Like we've said, we've tripped over ourselves to say countless times in this interview. And I really want to make sure that everybody that's listening goes and checks it out, because it's absolutely worth your time. Please don't wait for the trade. Or do wait for the trade after you've read it on ComiXology. It's something that everybody should check out. So guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your Thanksgiving Eve to hang out on our silly little podcast. The comic is We Only Kill Each Other, and it's on, the first issue is on ComiXology right now. Cody, you held your finger
before
up.
we sign off. I wanted to really quick, because we're talking about ComiXology next week.
You beat me to the
8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will also have Scott Snyder on to talk about his ComiXology work.
Little Scotty Snyder.
So welcome back, Scott.
Is that what you're going to call him, Matt, on the
I'm thinking
podcast?
about it. I'm really thinking about it. I was watching that episode of Seinfeld with the rooster named after Jerry, and that's Little Jerry Seinfeld. So yeah, that's probably coming, Scott. I'm sorry in advance. But thank you everyone for listening. Happy Thanksgiving. We will be back next week with Scott Snyder. Until then, be good to each other. Read something cool and support your local comic shop. Not necessarily in that order. We are the Comic Watchers Show. I'm Matt. This is Cody. And until next time, be good.